Well, good morning and almost afternoon to everyone. So I'm going to start this presentation by going back to around 10 months ago. So while I was preparing for this presentation, I went back to my archive of Zoom video recordings, and I found the very first Zoom video that I recorded. This was from, I think it was from January 30, 2020. It's still this year, so at the beginning of this year. And I remember Miss Akram, the first speaker, mentioning the challenges that teachers face in preparing for COVID-19 and teaching online and all of that. And so I have actually experienced some of these challenges. So in the very first video that I created on Zoom, that I recorded on Zoom, I was just trying to figure things out, practicing, figuring out the audio, the video, the best angle. And also, of course, Hong Kong colleagues would know how difficult it can be in Hong Kong to find a place where we can actually conduct our classes, online classes effectively. So if you'll notice, my background is not very good in this video. So this was 10 months ago. And I wouldn't really say that over the course of 10 months that today I can now have a perfect online Zoom class. But definitely, I think I have made some improvements. Okay. So just to give everyone some context, so for us here in Hong Kong, up till the end of the first semester of last school year, so this was around December 2019, yeah, we have been doing the traditional, the normal face-to-face classes, right? Face-to-face lessons. We have used online learning materials and activities to varying degrees, of course, depending on the colleague, depending on the teacher. But then because of COVID-19, at the beginning of the second semester in January, we were all basically forced to adopt, it's basically a 100% online teaching mode, right? So, and everything, at least for HKBU, was conducted on Zoom, so the platform that we're using now. And so we had to do everything online. And we had a chance to conduct our first 2 weeks of classes, first 1 week or 2 weeks of classes in the traditional mode, face-to-face mode. So that's why I entitled my presentation, 12 weeks, because our normal semester here in Hong Kong is it consists of 13 weeks. So just 12 weeks. But then I also had, because of delays in eLearning Forum Asia. So right now we're having this event at the end of this semester. So we all I decided to update my presentation and include my experience in the first semester, this current semester, the first semester of 2020-2021. And what's interesting about this semester is sometime early in the semester, maybe late September, our leaders at HKBU announced that we can start holding face-to-face classes again. Okay, so back to face-to-face classes. And this is, but we understand that some of our students are still, outside Hong Kong, like mainland China, so they won't be able to attend our face-to-face classes. So we refer to this as mixed mode. I'm not sure if this is what one of our colleagues here, Miss Violet Chan, asked about hybrid learning. So I'm not sure if this is what you mean by hybrid learning, but if this is, if this is what you're referring to, we did have some experience with this, and maybe I'm going to share some of my ideas for this later on, and in response to how Ms. Akram answered your question. Okay, so this is how things are. This is how things have been in the past few months, in the past year, basically. And so when it was announced that we can start having face-to-face classes again, of course, everyone was excited, right? I haven't seen my students in person for a very long time. So this was the first face-to-face class I had for like an entire semester, and I had a good proportion of my students show up in class. Of course, we still had to do, the Zoom class for the benefit of students who are not able to attend. But so everyone is happy, everyone was excited. But then eventually, as the semester went on, as the weeks went on, of course, we've had cases of COVID-19 on campus. And I don't know, maybe some of these students, they realized actually maybe it's better if we just do it online, maybe it's more convenient, maybe it's, I don't know, for whatever reason. Over the next few weeks, more and more, my classroom started looking more like this. They started becoming more and more empty. But of course, I still had to do the mixed mode teaching, where I had to conduct my online Zoom classes inside the classroom. And of course, in almost every class, I would have a few students attend the face-to-face classes. Okay, so this is what's been going on in Hong Kong, and particularly at HKBU in the past few months. And in these past two semesters, I've taught 8 courses, and most of them are either marketing courses or entrepreneurship courses. So yeah, these are marketing courses, marketing, entrepreneurship, and my students are from both undergraduate and taught postgraduate programs. So I'm just going to share my experiences with you from these 2 semesters. And I'm going to share specifically some online learning activities that I found effective, okay, in these courses. And I'm going to share some student feedback with you, specifically feedback that came from the first semester. And then 1 or 2 things that I learned from my experience. And the hope is, for us to just learn from each other's experiences so that we can get better in doing this, because it's very likely that we have to keep on doing it in the coming semesters. So let's start with online learning activities. When I'm designing online learning activities, I start with the goal or purpose of the activity. What do I want to achieve with the learning activity? And then I also consider what's the most effective way of delivering the learning activity. So the main options for us, of course, would be synchronous and asynchronous, which again, this is something that Ms. Akram already discussed earlier in her presentation. So for the goal or purpose, I specifically consider the type of interaction that I want to encourage with the learning activity. Do I want to use it more to encourage interactions between my students or among my students? Or do I want to give my students more opportunities to interact with me? Okay, so either student-student or student-teacher interactions. And then for the purpose, I look at three main objectives. Okay, do I want to use a learning activity to facilitate discussion? Do I want it to encourage more efficient or better collaboration among my students? Or do I want to use it for feedback and assessment? Okay, so I'm going to discuss a few learning activities with you, and please take note of these characteristics or goals or objectives, okay, for the learning activities. So let's start with this. Over the years, I've found it effective to use some kind of polling platform, or sometimes we call it personal response system or student response system, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so things like, or platforms or tools like Kahoot, Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, even Zoom has a built-in polling function. But over the years, I really found I've tried all of these, and my preferred tool has been Kahoot, because of, it's very colorful. It's, I don't know, it just seems fun. And I'll show some of the things you can do on Kahoot in a little while. And I found this to be effective both in my traditional classes, I mean, in my face-to-face classes, and also when we started having mostly online classes. And Kahoot allows me to actually do this both synchronously and asynchronously. Okay, so I'll just very quickly show you. what you can do on Kahoot with this. So here, this is my Kahoot account with all my Kahoot activities. So for example, you can choose to do it. This is basically your synchronous option. You can choose to do it live, okay? Or you can, I can, this is called a challenge. So this is the asynchronous option where I assign the activity to my students, and then they can answer. They have to submit their answers after a certain time period, given a certain deadline. And then after that, what I would do is collect all the answers and discuss the answers with my class. And I think this can be an effective way of doing this kind of activity in order to give students, more time to reflect on their answers, more time to actually submit their answers and think about their answers and so on, right? But from time to time, again, I think this was something mentioned by Ms. Akram earlier. Okay, so this is the asynchronous way of doing Kahoot. Of course, from time to time, I also feel that it might be more effective or better to do this kind of activity synchronously, meaning, while I'm having classes. So I decide to do this mainly to keep my students on their toes, okay, to keep them engaged, to make sure that they're paying attention. And in this specific example, I use this activity to process what we learned from the previous week. Okay, so maybe I should I'll skip to a later section of this. Okay, so of course, in an activity like this, students would make mistakes, and I try not to be discouraged by the mistakes made by my students. Okay, actually, I always tell them, if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to make a mistake here rather than in the final exam. Okay, or yeah, rather than when it really counts. So at least if they make a mistake here, it gives me a chance to give them an explanation, give them feedback, and so on. So I think this kind of activity can be really helpful. Okay, so what else? Okay, now for student-teacher interactions and to facilitate discussions, I often would also ask my students to answer or to give short answers to simple questions that they can answer on different platforms. Like sometimes I ask them to answer it on Zoom, in the chat window, or usually on Moodle if we do it asynchronously. So something like this. In one of my classes, we had to analyze and discuss a case study about a social enterprise, and then I gave my students some discussion questions beforehand, and then on the day of class, I posted the same questions on a Google Doc, and I shared the Google Doc with my students. And then I actually asked them to, okay, so choose one of these questions and then choose and answer one of these questions, okay? And then after they submitted all of their answers, we discussed everything. I gave them feedback, and yeah, and so on. So I think, so this created a very active and interactive session, okay, as we discussed this case. So again, this is using short answers for questions on a platform like Google Docs. Okay, now, ever since we started using Zoom, one really popular feature of Zoom, it turned out, was the breakout room function, where we are able to organize the class into different isolated Zoom rooms or breakout rooms. And then what I do in addition to this is ask each group to work on a specific task, usually using another tool like Google Docs. So like in this example, I just asked my students to brainstorm like how, so if this is a social entrepreneurship class, so how are you going to make your solution more effective? So just think of it, just list ways. You do it individually. Okay, do it individually by editing this Google Doc. Okay, and then yeah, I think the student groups were able to come up with some very good ideas. And what we did after was we discussed all the ideas as a group, and then I asked them to identify which ideas they like the most for their group. Okay, so breakout rooms on Zoom. Okay, one more thing, and actually two more. So this one is, I found Padlet to be a very good platform where students can actually showcase their work or their ideas. So in this class on social entrepreneurship, I asked my students to come up with an idea for a social enterprise and to post their ideas on Zoom. So I gave them like four weeks to work on their ideas. And then in this period, I also asked my students to try to read the ideas of their classmates and give feedback to their classmates and provide some comments. So I'm just going to show you, yeah, so this is what they did. Okay, so you see here, students giving some feedback, some comments to their classmates. And also I asked the students to present or pitch their ideas after the 2-week period. And then, so they did this individually, okay? And then based on this pitch, I asked the whole class to choose which ideas they like the most. So using Padlet to showcase the ideas and the work of students, I think can be effective in generating some interaction among students and also student feedback. Okay, and finally, one of the biggest challenges that we faced ever since we started teaching online is trying to make our students more engaged in our classes. Meaning, one difficulty we experienced, I don't know if my colleagues would had the same experience, is that usually our students would turn off their cameras while attending class. Okay, so I think as a university, we decided that we cannot really force them to turn on their cameras if they don't want to. So what I did in some of my classes is to just have a very simple activity, like in this class about corporate entrepreneurship and business development for top postgraduate students. I gave them a very simple assignment where they had to share one thing they owned, which they thought was really innovative, and just talk about it. Like, why do you think it's innovative? Okay. Yeah. So this student of mine is talking about like what's this? What do you call this? I forget. The one that flies like a helicopter, a small helicopter. My mind is blanking out. Anyway. Okay. So yeah, so those are some of the activities that I have done in some of my courses. I need to wrap up. I don't want to take up Sam's time. Okay. So now for some student feedback from the first semester. Fortunately, in general, my students have had, have given positive feedback to the activities that we've had in the first semester. Most of them have recognized the increased number of opportunities that they've had to actually interact with me, interact with each other, to participate in class activities and so on. So as you look at these comments from students from the teaching evaluation exercise, you see that common theme, right? Okay. And also they've had a positive response to the tools that we used in our classes like Zoom and Moodle. Okay. However, not everything's perfect. One thing I noticed is that more and more my students are starting to ask for more immediate feedback and also more personalized feedback, which is something that's not always easy to do, at least for me. Okay, given the number of students that I have, and yes, okay, 1 minute, I'm going to wrap up. Okay, yeah, so giving on time and customized feedback is something that our students are starting to ask for. Now, very quickly, 3 things that I learned so maybe in response to what Violet asked earlier, Miss Violet Chen, facilitating mixed mode classes, like so face-to-face and online classes, for me, is made easier by using multiple devices. So I would host my main Zoom class on the classroom computer. I would have a tablet for handwriting, and then another device for things that I don't want my students to see. Okay, so very quickly, 2 more slides. And then handwriting. I don't know what you think about handwriting. I've tried to do it in this presentation. What do you think about it? I think my students actually like it when I like when I do it. Okay, they prefer that I do it. It helps them better understand what I'm talking about. And finally, the recordings of our Zoom classes, they matter a lot. Our students do watch the recordings that we post. They try to catch up with the lessons, and also since some of them miss face-to-face classes or even the online classes, having the videos for them that they can use to review for the final exam and also to catch up with the lesson is very helpful. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. So if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
you
No problem. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know what? When I practiced this, it took me like 12 minutes. And then, so of course, when I started doing it, it's
actually I'm sorry for Miss Akram. Also, I accidentally ended your session about 4 minutes earlier. So if you have any questions that you would like to follow up with Miss Akram,
Miss Akram, you can ask Miss Akram questions.
Yeah, Miss Akram or Dr. Archie, you can make use of this about 3 minutes time. We can chip in 1 to 2 questions.
Then Jean Ong, thank you very much for reminding me drone. For some reason, it escaped my mind. That's a drone, of course.
Okay, we do have some questions here. The first one will be from Dutchin, right? What is a typical sequence of learning activities in your synchronous online class? Actually, Ms. Akram can address to this question as well, if you like to.
Yeah, you want to do it first, Ms. Akram? Or maybe I can do it first. So typically, you know what? Something I wasn't able to discuss that I discovered in the second semester. It's very important to do to look at the class roster. It's like checking attendance, but not really. So I just want to get a chance to say hi to each student, and then usually if they're present, they turn on their microphone and they say hi back. So if we have a morning class, I get to say good morning to everyone, and they get to say good morning back to me. And it's okay if we spend like 15 minutes on this. I found that it's a very good way to start the class, so everyone's in a good mood when we're having class. So after that, just lesson, and then what I usually do is have like split the class into different chunks, because here in Hong Kong we would have each week we would just have one big 3-hour class. Okay, so it can be very unwieldy. So what I would do is split it into chunks, smaller chunks of maybe 1 hour, where I would have like 30 to 40 minutes of discussion, and then a 10-minute activity, usually synchronous, and then we would process it, we would talk about it, just to make keep the students engaged. That's for me.
Okay, next we have another question from our speakers. Dr. Lau, what are the must-have elements of your successful online teaching? We still have 1 more minute to answer this.
Okay. Actually, thank you, Dr. Lau, for the question. This is for not just for online teaching. It's for I think this is equally important, even if you're teaching face-to-face, and it's just preparation. Although maybe the difference is we have to spend more time preparing if things are done online. It's just the more prepared you are, the more prepared you are, the better the experience of your students will be. I think that's it. And also maybe one more thing that's specific to having online classes is to just be open-minded and give students the benefit of the doubt. Like not always assume that assuming the negative, reasons for their behavior or actions or something like that. Because, what we are experiencing, the difficulties that we are experiencing because of COVID-19, it's not just unique to us. Okay, our students are also, of course, experiencing similar challenges, often maybe even more difficult challenges. So we have to be mindful of that. And maybe if it means being more flexible, being more understanding, maybe extending deadlines if you don't usually do it, something like that. Yeah, I think it would just help our students learn better.
Thank you very much.